So first of all, I want to say thank you, because there are several people, many people in the room, who have been part of the process of the first 2 books of my trilogy getting published. You know who you are, and if you were at the launch party, you saw them scrambling madly, and some of the members who helped me beforehand but couldn't be at the event are here, so thank you. I'm going to talk more about reader fatigue than author fatigue, but it is a real thing when you're trying to write a trilogy. You start to feel like, what is the point? Who's ever going to want to read this thing anyways? So if you don't have a group of writers that you have reciprocity, and reciprocity means they don't just give to you, you give back to them. And so you've got this thing of favors. The bookshelf in the back is on loan from Joan, so I lent her my A-frame. There's things that you do in trading beta reads and different things so that you don't give up and your fellow reader doesn't give up. So, thank you. So, first of all, when I teach writing, there are 6 main tools to building a fiction or memoir. And from now on, I'm just going to say fiction, but memoir follows the same rules. It is told like a story. And those tools are character, plot, and setting, a beginning, a middle, and an end. When you're writing a trilogy, these components still apply. You simply have these characters and settings that may stretch over the 3 books instead of just 1. You may have a plot for each of the books that is distinctive, but you also have to have a thread that connects the 3 books. So it is more involved, it's more complicated. And you have a middle that you have to figure out how it connects to the first book, how it leads to the last book, without it frustrating or annoying the reader. And the final book, well, it had better not disappoint, because the end of the end book had better pay off for the amount of time that the reader has spent. And I can do this. I'm a science fiction writer, but technology gets me.
It won't work with your eyes, though.
There we go. So, this simple sketch is what started me teaching at Ollie. These were the things the beginning writers just didn't seem to get. And it also made me understand that this is often what helps a trilogy work. As long as you have these components and you work them together, it made it work. So the goal today is to understand how plot, character, and setting, beginning, middle, end, can drive the trilogy so that the 3 books work together. And why am I specifically talking about a trilogy instead of just a series? Book series, just, geez, they seem to crowd the stores, and everybody seems to be writing 14, 16 book series. And so one, Margie asked, but the other is because trilogies are near and dear to my heart. I actually have 9 books in the Praxis Cluster Saga. I couldn't sell 9 books as an unknown author, but there was something that happened to me when I was 15. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, it had a build-up, but there was a climax in the first movie. But then, Darth Vader's X-Wing went off. So my mom said, you knew the villain in black would be back. But that didn't diminish the celebration when Princess Leia puts the chain of the award over Chewbacca or she didn't do Chewbacca, she only did the humans, that was very prejudiced. And everybody, Chewbacca roared and everybody celebrated, but you were waiting for that next movie. And then Empire Strikes Back seems like it might have only been a bridge movie, but it's not. It's Luke discovering that he has the power. And yes, there's the family drama of, Luke, I am your father. But you have the love story start. And the fact that Luke kissed her, even though he turns out to be her brother, nothing. Okay. And then it all builds up to the final victory over the Empire, and Darth Vader is redeemed by saving Luke Skywalker. So this, for me, who was a geek, had my group of friends, but I did not fit in because I was a girl who was into science, I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I wanted a different universe, and I wanted to be a different person. And you can see it in these covers. The first cover, Escaping the Dashia, is very 80s, isn't it? It is a Star Wars, Star Trek, 80s young adult novel cover because I got to help design it. The second one, since I'm with a new publisher and actually had a marketing budget and a budget for an artist, is a modern young adult science fantasy cover. And I had somebody who was able to do some of my aliens. But look at the young woman. She is who I fantasized about being. All right? So, with the power of that, I discovered trilogies. So let's talk about some of them. These days, the equivalent at first, and not so bright and cheery, is Suzanne Collins' YA dystopia Hunger Games. Other books got added, but originally it was a trilogy. Then there's historical fictions, once again, start out at a trilogy and then people added War of the Roses. And specifically, I think trilogies hit that sweet spot because they not only tell a complete story, but you can mine the depths of these characters and have the characters grow over the 3 books, and you can explore settings that readers couldn't really truly come to feel that they owned and understood in a single book. And you still avoid reader fatigue because they know there's a payoff coming. You say trilogy, they say thank God. All right? So, and the other thing with your plots is you can have layers to it. Now, everybody knows plot, subplots, right? But overarching plot is hard to do if you don't have more than one book, right? You got a plot, you got all your subplots. But with trilogies, your plots can be like an onion. Yeah, well, onions kind of taste nasty. Let's go for chocolate cake. It can be like a 3-layered cake. And that's because it allows you to tell the story in layers. It gives the author the time to develop the characters, the readers come to be comfortable in the world, and the readers are confident that it's satisfying, that there's going to be an ending. So they won't be suffering from there ain't no satisfaction. All right? So other series, though, I do want to clarify something because these terms get totally knocked about. You can have series that have a number of books that each book pretty much stands alone. Cozy mysteries, okay? Those happen pretty much the same with the same characters, and nothing that's happened in the past is really absolutely necessary to them in a lot of the books. Few things are referenced, characters seldom change. I don't find that satisfying. So, Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, Inspector Perot, these are the ones that you can pretty much count on. I think of Murder, She Wrote. You knew if there was a friend of hers in the story, that friend was either going to be the murderer or the victim or was going to be blamed for the murder and she had to clear it. Those were the plot lines. All right? So the problem is it can become repetitive. So, there are series where it does build on one upon the other that go for longer than a trilogy. Harry Potter and Dresden Files, series of unfortunate events. These days, the limited series on like Netflix, that's pretty much what they're all based on. But what people don't realize, that was revolutionary in television when Babylon 5 first aired. Having an overall arc of the story and everything not going back to normal baseline at the end had been a rule of television. When you watch an original Star Trek episode, everything had to go back to exactly how it was when the episode began, or the writer lost a job. All right, well, okay, Gene Roddenberry usually was the writer, but you get the idea. So, the other thing are books that are multiple books, but they're technically not a series. They're one large book that was just too huge for the publisher to print it, so they got broke into volumes. Lord of the Rings is not a trilogy. It's volume 1, 2, and 3. And so it is one of those things. Stephen King's The Dark Tower. Actually, the middle book is just the middle of a book. And they're just so gargantuan. If you are a new writer and you write a book and it goes on for 1,500 pages, good luck, have fun. I have seen self-published writers try to buck the system and just self-publish that and go through HE double toothpick. And I've seen them try to go to traditional publishers and try to say, I know that this doesn't meet the mold, not going to normally happen. And normally what happens, and I'll get to this when I switch hats to my editor hat, is you're better off breaking them into 3. It's just the way it works. So those are volumes, not independent books. Sagas. I hear things called sagas. A saga is a term that encompasses a genre. It has nothing to do with the number of books. It means it has a wide scope, kind of like epic, but it particularly means that it has a scope of stories and narratives such as a religious saga of the Catholic Church during the Crusades, or a family saga of the generation during the Jewish pogroms. Fiddler on the Roof could have turned into a saga if he'd followed Tevye and the daughters. I wish that would have been great. So Tolstoy's War and Peace, Alex Haley's Roots. It doesn't matter how many books it was, it's a large encompassing thing that's probably too big for a book, and it's dealing with the subject matter. So, on the flyer, and I think God bless Sherry for designing the flyer, it asks some great questions. So I'm going to answer the questions, and this way we can keep me on target and save other questions until the end, because I'm easily distracted by bright and shiny questions. I will try to make sure that we leave time for other questions at the end. The first one was, does every novel have series potential? No. Moving on. Okay. No. Don't try to turn your peach cobbler into a 3-layer chocolate cake. If it is complete and it gives the reader everything they need, and when we get to the plot chart, people know that triangle that's an arc where you have the inciting incident, events happen, you have a climax. If it completes that and it rounds out the tension and the stakes, and you can tag, and they lived happily ever after, and they all died. Yeah, that pretty much ends it. Then leave it. Let it be. Move on to another project. There's got to be a greater issue that is left to mine. A problem left unresolved. Something the characters discovered about themselves that pushes them forward in order to justify another book. So, the next question. Should you draft all 3 books before you try to submit book 1? Yes and no. So, in the great words of Terry Pratchett, your first draft is just telling yourself the story. Do what you feel like doing. It's for you. Have fun. If you want to write it, write it. If you don't, don't. Don't give yourself writer fatigue. Nobody's telling you you've got to do it. Here's my suggestion, and nobody come back at me and say, I told you to do this, is if you finished book 1, remember you haven't finished. You've just done a draft, okay? And if before you can do a second draft, you need further development of the setting or the characters or what's going to happen next to be able to foreshadow it, then do what I call a discovery draft, a 0 draft. It doesn't have to be a really nice, pretty draft. Nobody else has to see it. Then, either come back to that first book, and it'll be the better for it, go write a different project, or, oh my gosh, this is just going so good, I can't stand it, I've just got to go ahead and finish it, and write almost a short story 0 draft, or an outline, or even just a chart outline of what happens in book 3. Because what is book 1 and book 3? They're bookends.
Right.
And if you don't know how book 3 ends, how do you really know how to begin book 1? And if there's a killer character, well, maybe literally killer character, or just a really cool character in book 2, towards the end, that really is better than this really dull Bueller character in book 1, steal them. It's your character. You can do plagiarism on yourself. Take them, transplant them, make them better. Then, get that book good, submit it, get feedback, do whatever you're going to do, but you better be able to do that. And at some point, Marla is going to pass around a sheet where you can sign up either for my newsletter or to be notified of my class. That's when I switch to editor mode. and you will get the PowerPoints and you will get the handouts for your use. You need to at least know the inciting incident, where the story began, if each book, what the climax probably is, it'll change in book 2 and 3, and what you want the resolution to be in book 3 before you get book 1 published or self-publish it, because you're gonna regret it if you don't. So, the other thing to be aware of, going back to the cake analogy, is this prevents you from serving a half-baked cake. If the book that I first had an agent and first had a publisher for had gotten published, it would have been these 2 books combined, nearly 600 pages, and it would have been, if I was going to grade it academically now in my Ollie class, by my rubric, it'd be a B-, objectively. I am much prouder of what this is, thanks to the people who have critiqued, beta read, and even though I'm an editor, I hired an editor, because only an editor has a fool for a client if they hire themselves. So, that's my warning. So, next question. Oh wait, one more thing, because obviously, why is it not? That's the blank version. It doesn't look so intimidating. Okay? You literally just have plot, character, setting, and the exposition. At that crease, where it does that sharp turn, that's the inciting incident. Everything was going fine during this lecture until the aliens came and took me away. Next event. Everybody called the FBI and they said, we don't know what you're talking about. You all were exposed to a hallucinogenic. There's no such person as Rebecca Inch-Partridge. Next event, I wake up on the spaceship and all my characters were real from the Praxis cluster. Okay? See how you can just plug in things? That's what that does. So now, how do you keep character, plot, and setting details straight? Thank you for the question. Some people use Scrivener. I just keep a Word doc open. Actually, I keep 2 Word docs open. One is my cheat sheet. I call it a style sheet. That is what you will send an artist, little cut back, so that they know what hair color, eye color, height, age the characters are. It is the barest minimum stuff of a list alphabetically of your characters, your places, and your events. So me, it's races, places, and places means planets for me. And then I also have to keep an encyclopedia of more detailed stuff. And in order to keep the races, places, and people, my character sheets get very detailed. They each have a timeline with the years, so I know when Vance is 17, Twyla's 19. And when this event happened, one was 7, one was 9. I don't have to constantly try to remember stuff like that. And then I also have a calendar. You know how I keep giving out those publicity calendars for my editing? That's not just trying to get more clients. It's the easiest way to keep track of a story. And was it 3 weeks ago that they got lost in the mud? Or was it 3 days ago? And was that near somebody's birthday, somebody's anniversary, a national holiday? a major remembrance of something. There is hardly a month that doesn't have some significance. And yet when I read manuscripts, even memoirs, people don't mention how the fact that it was just after 4th of July impacted their uncle, who was a veteran, getting drunk off his ass and them having to go get him from the Veterans Hall again. I think there was a connection. So, besides a quick cheat sheet, an encyclopedia, or the Praxis Cluster Bible as I call it, I also hire a copy editor. Because by the time the book is done, I've done so many rewrites, I can't remember up from down and down from up. I'm tired. And I can't see what's there. And I might have made so many changes, now it's inconsistent. And readers will forgive many things. And they will do a suspension of disbelief for magic and fantasy. What they will not allow is inconsistency in magic. If you say a simple spell drains somebody the equivalent of walking 2 miles, and then you have them do a super complex spell and feel energized, either you've got to explain a paradoxical effect, or you're inconsistent and you're going to make people mad. The other thing is reverse outlining. Are you familiar? It's that terrible thing you have to do after you've written the book, where you write a 1-paragraph or 1-sentence summary of each and every frickin' chapter. But you gotta do it. Because you gotta know where stuff happened in which chapter so you can look back up, and so you make the flow is right, and that when you do all these edits and changes, you didn't screw things up and have some redundancies, and so when you're working on book 2 and book 3, you know where to find it and you keep the flow going. Okay, so let's move right along before I run out of time. Oh, how it is different in a trilogy. You use plot, character, and setting in each book as you have been taught, right? And so you develop these characters, you develop this plot, you develop this setting. Great, wonderful. Is anybody going to care enough about that character to want to spend 3 books with them? Better make sure they do. You got to make them more interesting. And you've got to figure out how things change. Everything has consequences. Because of this, the character did that. Because the character did that, this happened. Because this happened, another character did this. And sometimes characters that were on the protagonist's side are no longer on their side. They have different goals. So over this arc, those connections in characters start to change as they grow and are in different circumstances. The setting is affected by what happens in a plot. If you nuke a city in book 1, that city has not completely recovered in book 2. If somebody loses their best friend in book 1 in a cozy mystery, please don't have them all hunky-dory in book 2 and not really care that they lost Jane, their best friend since 1st grade. That's not fair. If the town of Jericho is surviving a nuclear disaster and everybody's starving, they're going to act differently by book 3. So, connecting the arc. First, you've got to have your people. So this is an exercise you'll get if you sign up. It's the simplest way to make your people complex enough to survive 3 novels. The original qualities are the ones you just already knew they had. And that is going to make them I don't want to say nearly cardboard, but obvious, okay? And this is the one that usually is because I based it on somebody. And Frank, I'm going to pick on you. So I'm going to just make up a character right now, okay? So let's say I'm going to have a neighbor in my nuclear apocalypse story be Frank Neeson. Okay, too obvious. Everybody will know it's Frank. Frank will know it's Frank. And I would write what I know of Frank. Okay? Can I get into Frank's head? Everybody say, no, I'm not a telepath, even though Twyla is. That's fiction. Okay? So I need to make that character more complex. Well, who do I know really well? My husband. Okay? So now, if I take Frank and my husband and squish two characters together, I can come up with a whole bunch of qualities to put in that row. Right? So right off the bat, I've got a lot of obvious qualities. But then I take it further. I think of who Frank and who Ernie might admire. I write those two names down, and then I think of their traits, good and bad. Qualities aren't necessarily negative or positive. Somebody who is aggressive in a room, like if I walked up right to Susan's face and go, oh my gosh, I want that shirt. Can I buy that shirt from you? Oh, I want that shirt. That is not socially acceptable, right? But if I was a female football player and I'm on the field, aggression is good, right? So those traits of the two people, I think of that character who's an amalgamation of Frank and my husband would admire. Now I've got more traits. But they're one-sided, right? What does every character need? Come on, Shakespeare.
Opposition.
Conflict, tragic flaw, yes. So you go back to the obvious original qualities and you write down the obvious. So this is a lie. Everybody who is really obvious one way secretly is the opposite. You just assume that for this exercise. So I'm outgoing and gregarious. So I must be secretly shy. Okay, you know better. But the character I would base on that would be they're overcoming it. Or it's their fear. Or it's something that disgusts them. They don't like people who are shy. So they're super pumped. That's not true either. So, you fill out that list. Now you have complicated protagonist. But what's the difference between a protagonist and an antagonist?
Good guy, bad guy.
Well, the villain is a bad guy. An antagonist is just in the way of the goal of the protagonist. So, here, it's really hard to tell who's the good guy, bad guy, unless you're into Les Miserables. And I will die on that hill that Javert was not a bad guy. He was just doing his job. He only saw justice as justice. And Jean Valjean had broke his parole, and that was it. There was no gray in that. That was black and white. And so the good guy is the one being aggressive. That's Jean Valjean. The guy backing up and taking it is the bad guy of the story. It's Javert, who has to let him pass in order to save a young man, and then ends up committing suicide because he can't reconcile mercy with justice. I love a tragic antagonist, don't you? So you have to do the exact same exercise with your antagonist, because unless you're Lord of the Rings, you can't get away with a Sauron or Saruman. And it is one thing that I hope most people realize. The difference between an antagonist and a villain is your villain just does bad, right? An antagonist has a different goal, and that gets in the way of your protagonist. But if you're writing the villain, keep Jim Butcher. Oh, Dresden Files. This is an example of a series that avoided fatigue syndrome because he took time away, wrote other books, and he kept the character's life changing enough to keep the story interesting. It's not the same old thing over and over again, but he did it in series of trilogies without calling them it. He did 3 set, waited a while, did a 3 set, waited a while, did a 3 set. It's a good trick. But, like he says, no one is an unjust villain in his own mind. And I'm skipping to the bottom. We're all the heroes of our own story. Now think what that can do to your 3-arc book set if your antagonist is that interesting. You see what you can do more by letting that character think that they aren't. And I'm not talking just the evil genius that thinks to save the earth they got to kill 90% of the population. Please, that's been done. But to actually have a point. And nothing is better than to have the protagonist and antagonist facing each other, and for the protagonist to find out that they were wrong about something. Just because they were wrong about something doesn't mean it's a whole shebang. Or when they end up on an incident where the antagonist and protagonist have to work together. Okay, now those god-awful other Star Wars movies never happened, and Kyren and the whiny, wimpy, wannabe Vader never kissed, and they never, but when they had to duel together for a while, I heard the audience gasp and cheer. Something to think about.
I didn't get that. Could you try?
I didn't get that. One of the things that can be unexpected, but you have to build to it, is when the antagonist has a different goal, maybe even wrong, but won't cross a certain line. Javert would not let that young man die. He couldn't cross that line. That put him in a really bad position. There is character development. Okay, so now we've covered character, we've talked about plot, we've talked about them having opposing goals, how they go about it. One of my biggest gripes with Walking Dead, with Dark Grim, is when your protagonists go with the ends justify the means, and it becomes any means necessary to save humanity. That, what does humanity even mean anymore? So we're watching this, basically in Japan or in Korean it means Sea of Tranquility, the Silent Sea. And they discovered that a research project on the moon had discovered that there is water on the moon, but it has certain properties. And this property makes it undrinkable by humans as we are. But if they can figure out how to change it, it would be a source of renewable, ever-present water. So if you drink it, you would never get thirsty again. It would replicate and just keep making water. That's what science fiction is for, right? But to genetically engineer a human to be able to do that, there's consequences. And so since they didn't think it was ethical to just say, hey you, we're going to experiment on you and you're probably going to die, they cloned children from one of the scientists and killed 73 of them with this water to save humanity. Nope, 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 nope. I'm sorry, that protagonist is no longer a protagonist to me. I cannot vote for that person to be a good guy, because I do equate protagonist and good guy, but that's not always the case in literature. You have the anti-hero. So, could I read a trilogy of anti-hero? Nope. Other readers? Maybe. All right? So, the strategy normally differentiates the protagonist who will not kill the child to save the train, or just won't cross that line, or it'll be the moment of redemption for the antagonist. That strategy is a differentiating thing. And then when you look at certain points, you've got to insert both in the plot and in the characters inner conflict. We haven't even talked about that yet. Not everything can be external. Aliens coming, earthquakes happening, nuclear bombs going off. Well, you have to have internal conflict too, right? So for my nuclear apocalypse novel, there's the internal struggle that she's pregnant, and does she really want that baby to come into a world where 80% of the population in her area is dying of radiation and is probably going to be mutated and probably not survive anyways. That's a horrible internal conflict. But it's a plot point. Your villain or your antagonist at some point might have some second thoughts, might want to turn around. There is a gorgeous song in Les Miserables where he's stars in the heaven, and why are you silent? And he's reaching what he cannot hold. And so he plunges. And he could have had redemption. And those moments hold the reader so they'll be willing to go to the next book and see what happens. Okay, so what else is different about a trilogy? Well, we haven't talked about setting yet. I'm going to just nod my hat to Joan. She did a wonderful presentation on being transported there, and that in order to do that, you've got to bring all 5 senses alive. Most books just concentrate on what you can see, and maybe what you hear, but what do you smell? What do you feel and touch and taste? But in a lot of novels, and even memoirs fail to do this more than any other thing. The reader doesn't know the time, the place, the society, the neighborhood that you were living in, that you're talking about. It's all in your head. You have to show it through the people you interacted with, the house you were having coffee in, the neighbors who walked by. And so when you show it, then people can live it with you. That's basic setting. But in trilogies, you have to, after you develop it, remember what you show the reader first in book 1 is what they consider normative. They take that as baseline. And everything else is compared to that. So Tatooine was a desert world. Well, next we have an ice world. Next we have a jungle world. Aren't we easy and happy because we make it so nice and clear in Star Wars how different these planets are? Okay? So when you introduce where the protagonist is, it's also assumed that's the protagonist's frame of reference. So if your protagonist grew up in LA and now comes to Auburn, you've got a nice, easy way to compare and contrast so that you can bring up things without it being info dumps. No paragraph long, detail rich, going on and on and on. And you get to do it showing the character's personality and opinion towards it. Do they prefer Auburn to LA? Are they glad to have escaped it? Or do they miss something from LA? Now you're character building while building the world. Setting should almost always do double duty. It either has to move the plot, because in that setting turns out to be the person he's going to fall in love with, or it needs to character build because this guy don't like anything. No matter where he goes, he's cranky. Okay, so setting must either move the plot, or it must move the character building. And if you do that, then during the arc, it's going to make it so the reader begins to feel like an expert in this world and in these characters. So they won't feel lost by book 3, and you can have the action move a lot faster. So think about what the main setting of the book is, then what the best part of it is, and what the worst part of it is, and what keeps the protagonist there, or remembering there, something that holds them, and bring it up from time to time. Have them go back. If you want to really explore a world, reuse a certain place as a reorienter, even if they have moved on to a certain place, they're going to think about home. Narnia did it wonderful. He started off hating home, the piggy farm. He was just an apprentice farm boy. He wanted to be so much more. By the end of it, he loves the farm. And the way he sees the farm is different. Then, not just how does the character's attitude towards it change. When they do get to go back, how has it changed? So, oh, there should have been one more slide. There's a slide. I lost a slide. Oh no, the world's going to end. Okay. So, going back now that we've done plot, character, setting to death. Are you all just, you got that ingrained in your head? Are you going to hear that over and over and over again? Let's talk about beginning, middles, and ends. There is a temptation when you're doing something this long to slam all the information the reader needs to know right off the get-go. And writers do it in different ways. They front load the first chapter by just having so much in that first chapter explaining where the reader is and what's happening, and it takes 3 chapters before anything actually happens, okay? Or they go, I'll get around this. I'll do a prologue that's basically a letter to the reader saying 1,000 years ago the Empire of Shireen ruled the cosmos, but then the Dark Lords of Cassintian came and all was chaos and the things were torn apart, but then the lights came and this and that, and then the reader will know all the background they need to know. That's one way that people do that. And it used to be called eating your broccoli. And in Arthur C. Clarke's day, that was an author that used to be quite famous, it was quite acceptable in science fiction and fantasy. The whole idea was, hey reader, let's just get this all out of the way so I can just tell you the story. It's not acceptable anymore. People don't want to eat their broccoli. So the way that we get around that is on your zero draft. And yes, I use the word zero because if you think it's your first draft, you get so inhibited. You get constipation. Take a laxative. Just chill. Write your discovery draft however you want to write it, including that 10-page prologue that nobody is going to read. Put it up on a stand next to your desk, start the story, and when you hit a point that says Shira and Naomi are walking down the hill towards the village of Kyra, go, oh, okay, heck, they're not going to know that Shira is from the village of light and Naomi is from the village of dark, and they're going to this village. Okay, here in my prologue, it says the village of light was descendants of the so-and-so empire that had conquered the other village 100 years ago. I can have them talking about the meeting of the latest peace talks happening in the village that they're going to, and how their mothers don't like them being friends because of this 1,000 years of hatred. Now I put lines through all that information that was in the prologue. I've covered it. Without an as you know, Bob.
Yeah.
It's what's moving forward because of it. Not a huge exposition about the past. It's the consequences of the past. And I just, as I'm going, every time I hit something that wouldn't make sense, I find it, I work it in, I move along. And then by chapter 7, the reader's gotten all their broccoli and they didn't even know they ate it. It makes it a little easier. So, then let's talk about, so that's usually the beginning of the first book, the beginning of the second book, the beginning of the third book. You really struggle with, how do I make sure the reader's not lost? Okay? So the other thing are the terms. I have a whole language. Rest slow. No, you will never get to learn it. I'm not Tolkien. It did not work having it worked into the books. That's partly why they're a lot shorter now. You can thank me later, or you can thank my editor and every reader I had. You use the terms you need to make it distinct, and you ruthlessly cut every other one. You introduce a term once in a context that makes sense. Within 2 paragraphs, seriously, within 2 paragraphs, you use it again to reinforce it. Then, if it hasn't been used in a while, you make sure you use it in a context that stamps the reader. If you have to have the reader rely on a glossary, you didn't do your job. Now, a lot of YA books like to have glossaries. That's a bonus. They don't rely on it. What's more popular? Maps. Oh my God, they love maps. And that's going to eliminate all the stress over the names of places Because if it's in context, they know it's a place. Just don't make them sound enough alike that you get confused between Toratal and Tamatal. I mean, why would you do that? Don't do that to me, okay? So the other thing you do with terms is you prioritize. My races, my 16 races, are the love of my life. Oh, I got a husband and a child, and grandchildren. Okay, they're the third love of my life. And so I make sure that the reader gets comfortable with the 5 key races in books 1, 2, and 3. The other ones, not so much. 5 years from now, when I do the other trilogy, when she's all grown up and it's not a YA series, there's 3 other races that she's going to work with. JoJo's going to get excited because of Plessorians. And I will make sure that they are. What I did not want to do was have a cantina scene where I've got a gazillion different looking aliens and no nod to anatomy and physiology. I know these races. I had them crowdsourced through scientists at conventions. I had to have them make sense to me. I know their personalities. I did not bring the personality quiz. That's going to be up on my website. Thank you, JoJo. You can all find out what race you would be. And so those terms, those names, had to come before any of the other gobbledygook. And techno jargon is out in science fiction. Okay? You can have phasers, you can have photon torpedoes, you can have warp drive, but you can't have the ookily look connect to the boogity bot that goes to the shookity show. Nobody wants to read it. All right. So now let's talk about when you get to the end. The middle book is a problem. So your first book, and I'm going to talk about this when I do the editor phrase, in order to either sell well as a self-published author or to be able to get an acquisition editor or an agent, it has to be able to stand alone. They just don't want a cliffhanger, something that people can't feel satisfied, because they just don't know how long it's going to be before book 2 comes out. Okay? So then, book 2, a lot of people, new authors, think that it serves no other purpose than to get to book 3. You've got a decision to make. Is it just a bridge book? Does it just pick up from right after book 1 and just leave a cliffhanging so that they want to hurry out and get book 3 and dang, you better be able to crank that out? Well, you know, if anything happens like happened to me with health and publisher issues, and instead of coming out a year and a half later, it's 2.5 years later, you got a problem. Or is it going to have a solid enough beginning that it feels like you could pick it up even if you don't remember book 1 too well? And when you finish it, are you going to feel like it's an accomplishment, that something really got done, that it is good to go? Now, no pressure. But when you get to the end of book 3, mic drop, boom! People want fireworks. They want it to sing in their heart. They want it to pay off. They want the protagonist to have changed and come a long way, baby, from what that character was at the beginning of book 1. They want to see not sub-characters, the supporting characters to have either gotten what they want or discovered that they wanted something else. They want either redemption of some of the antagonist characters. They want it all, and they want it now. And so you got to work and rework and work and rework that end of book 3. And in order to make the end of book 2 really catchy and get them to get book 3, you've got to be careful of the gimmick, twist, ending. So, we've survived the zombie apocalypse. We're all here in this room together, safe and sound. The bus is coming to take us to the only city that is zombie fortified. None of us are contaminated. Everything's okay. And then the sprinklers come on with the water that has the contaminated substance that caused everybody to become zombies. And we all know we're going to turn into zombies. What? Okay? So watch the gimmick, watch the sudden twist. Don't do stuff that readers know is just, you gotta buy the book. The hook. Yeah, hooks belong at the beginning of chapters and the beginning of books, not at the end when you're dealing with trilogies. And you want loyal readers that feel like they're getting what they've paid for. All right. So it's really hard to find endings that satisfy but leave readers wanting more for book 1 and 2. It's a hard goal. Sorry, it's the one you're stuck with if you choose this path. So choose wisely. The other thing to keep in mind is after you've written the trilogy, you have not failed. You did it. You did this. If you write a never-ending series, you have never finished it. You have never achieved it. It has never come to a conclusion. But if you write a trilogy, take what you learn from that, go write something else in a different sandbox. You learn from that experience, you get to go have fun, you avoid writer's fatigue, and then you can come back and write another trilogy in that universe, and the readers don't get to tell you who, what, when, or where in that universe it has to be. So you will not be the next Game of Thrones. Okay? So now I'm going to switch hats. Hello, I'm Rebecca Inch-Partridge, your friendly local editor. So, editors, acquisition editors, like when I was with Amazing Stories, and developmental editors, often go to a lot of seminars, conventions, conferences with agents. And I have had an agent for a while before she had to leave due to health reasons. So I'm going to pass on some of the things I hear from them quite frequently too. One of the most common requests from authors is, I've written a 240K novel and can't self-publish it and make it sell, and I cannot get a publisher to buy it. Please help me turn it into 3 books. So, these tips are ones that will help even if you haven't done that yet. Okay? So, this is good for all writers, all books, even memoirists. Cut down your number of characters. You want to merge any characters that can be merged. Give the scenes to the best characters. And eliminate characters who come on stage to deliver the royal decree to the queen, then walk off, never show up again. There was just a plot device that could have been done by the guard that the princess is having an affair with. Much more interesting. All right? So make sure the characters you do have stand out and that there is something the reader can literally hang their hat on to keep the character straight. Oh, that's the techie one. Oh, That's the one that wears the charm of her dead mother because she believes her mother's spirit communicates to her through it. Oh, that's the one that was a model back in high school. Something, just something. And a little hint on how trilogies are different. There is a part of your mind that recognizes faces, hopefully, right? Did you know that that stimulates the pleasure center? It does. It's not erotic, it's just a normal thing, okay? Well, it does that even if you don't know the person or are friends with the person, as long as you don't have a negative connotation with the person. So when I go to conventions and I see somebody who I've seen at the convention for years and years and years, maybe never spoke to, but I don't have anything against them, it makes me feel good to what? See a familiar face. Right? In novels, when a character returns that the reader is familiar with, they get that same release. They get that same feeling. So that's why you want to reuse your characters. So the other thing when trying to chop a super long book into 3 books, and Frank and I really had to work it for his book 1 and book 2 in his Gold Rush series, is find a scene near the right place that has high tension, increase the stakes, bring in the pre-climax of the right people being there, move out stuff that doesn't need to be there to the next book, and make that the climax of book 1, okay? And then clean up the beginning of book 2 and reintroduce things in a low-level scene before something bad happens. Does that make sense? You following me? Okay. So, make sure that the character settings and plot lines are reintroduced without, as you know, Bobs, and large blocks of exposition. Not in your 0 drafts. In your 0 drafts, put, introduce this character as a numbskull who's got a heart of gold but doesn't know their way out of a latrine. Fine, put that in your 0 draft. And then show it in your next draft. All right? But make sure you reintroduce everybody in a way they're going to go, oh. So in book 3, I introduce a character, and my other critique group had been working with this set of characters a long time. And the second they heard him go, you did what, Anton? They went, oh, that's Chad. I didn't have to, nothing else. No tag, no nothing. So make sure you know your characters and you reintroduce them. So the other big thing for prospective clients, and I hope I don't touch on a nerve here, is authors who were so excited by their first book, they just wanted everybody to read it, so they self-published their first draft. And then they wrote their next book, and they learned how to write. And then they took it to the critique group, and then they rewrote it. And now they bring it to me, and they want me to edit it and rewrite it, and they want to take it to a traditional publisher, and because it's a really good book, and they want to get it published. Traditionally, you shot yourself in the foot. Why'd you do that? So, agents get this all the time, acquisition editors get this all the time, and the sequel might be amazing. It might be wonderful. Turning that sequel into a first book and pretending book 1 never happened is very hard. And what they would have to do is take book 1 off of Amazon, pretend it never happened, have you rewrite it to get up to the standards of that book 2, retitle it, get a new ISBN number, so nobody looks and sees you had under 1,000 sales, and try again. So that's why not publish a half-baked book one. Then, if you do find a great, let's say book two does it's fantastic, and you do all that, and it's good, it's great. Have you written a draft of book three? Because they're going to rush you. They want that book three in a year. They want the next book in a year. It took me 30 years. But luckily I had already written book three. That's why I said it's going to be 5 years before the next trilogy. Okay? So, in conclusion, before I do questions and answers, writing a trilogy is not for the faint of heart. It is like climbing a mountain. But does that look kind of like that plot arc?
Yes.
Do you think I did that by accident? I wish I could come down here, but you will see, down at this bottom, this is your everyday story. And then you look up, and you're excited by a character, or a setting, or this world and story. And that excitement is your inciting incident that won't get the heck out of your head, and it's like a volcano and it's going to explode. And so you have to embark on a journey. And that journey is one that I don't suggest trying to climb Mount Everest first. It's baby steps. You go up, you write a draft of the first book. Then you write a short story. Go do something easy. Go do something fun. Then you write a draft of the second book, just for fun. And then you're so excited by the first book and you know what you can do better, and you rewrite it. And you're further up the mountain. And before you know it, you've climbed that dang mountain. And the view is otherworldly, pun intended. All right, thank you very much, and we have 10 minutes for question and answer before hopefully somebody will buy my books. Yes?
If you're writing a series, write book one, and it kind of could stand alone because you don't realize you're going to do a series.
Yes?
So then you do book two, and it could stand alone, but you want the reader to know there's going to be book three. So is it fair to the reader at the end of book two, you're all done. You do your acknowledgments and you do your stuff. I mean, the book is done, but then you put on there, maybe on your author page, will this happen? Will so-and-so, you give a little hint, you give a little trailer. Is it fair?
You're going down the wrong trail.
Don't do it. Okay.
No, but there's a better way.
All right.
And I wish I had done it, and my publisher will reissue this one. It is perfectly good to put an excerpt of the next book at the back of your book.
All right.
That is one of the most appreciated things, and that helps tell a reader that it's going to be quality and that you've put some time into it. Excerpts are good.
Okay, thank you.
Next. Yes, Lisa.
Hey, Rebecca. I don't quite understand why Lord of the Rings, I always think of it as a trilogy. What's the difference between a trilogy and 3 volumes? I'm not quite following.
Okay,
you.
so if I had a 1,500-page book and I handed it to you, okay, that's just a 1,500-page book. But my printer could only bind 500 pages at a time. So I gave it to you in volume 1, 2, 3. That's Lord of the Rings. If instead I had said, Well, I'm so sorry, Mr. Tolkien. We need, at page 500, sort of a resolution and an ending. And you need at the beginning of book 2 to have a beginning that explains things a bit, reintroduces the characters, and has its own arc with a new ending. And each book has to be able to stand alone.
Oh.
That would be a trilogy.
So this is like,
So-
because of the whole overarching, the ring's gotta go to Mount Doom.
Yes.
It's
Yeah,
just
so-
one big, long, very long story.
Yeah, and there was a lack of any kind of introduction and closing in the middle. It literally was just chopped up and printed in volumes. And that was just a thing of the publisher. And God bless him, they could get away with it back then. But you got to remember, that was much more accepted because a lot of books were serialized in magazines and newspapers back then. Little Women was a serial before it was a book.
So was Tales of the City.
Yes, so many things. Okay, other questions? Yes, hi Karen, and welcome to Gold Country Writers.
Very much. So for me, it's the critic inside my own brain that is the one that kind of keeps me from. So for example, I did a book 2 of my series and when I was writing book 2, I figured out, oh, there's a book 3 as well. And so how do you not succumb to the pressure of, I mean, I know I can do the end of book 3. I know I can mic drop. But actually thinking about, getting into my head about the mic drop and putting pressure on myself, where can I separate those things?
It's understanding the levels of drafts. People, because we don't sit there and retype each draft, which I actually minimum 3 times key in totally separately. I don't just keep working and reworking the same manuscript. Don't understand the freedom of having a draft that you know 65% is never going to see the light of day. So you don't worry about that in draft 1. You don't worry about that in draft 2. In draft 3, you better have help. The day of the hermit writer is long gone. And so by draft 3, you've come up probably with the best ending you can come up with. Great, fantastic. It's probably a B+. You may be an A-. You sit down with our evening group or the new sci-fi group or one of the other spin-off groups, or you get 5 good beta readers, you're going to have an A++, and you're not going to know what to do with all the choices you're going to have to make it explode. And that really is the difference, is there's a point where you have to be okay with you've gotten it as far as you can go. You get inspiration. You choose, because the tie always goes to the writer, what input to use. Then you go to a professional, then you go to publication, or try to get an agent or a small press and go to publication. So there's no such thing as writer's block. There's always something else you can be doing. Yes, Karen. Oh no, we have 2 Karens in the room. Everybody run in fear.
That happens all the time.
Yes.
Okay, so for someone who wants to be published, it's not easy. I mean, it's not. You can finish your book, you can get 3 mic drops, and I'll tell you, it's still, you got to get unless you do KDP, you got to get the literary agent, or you got to find
A small press, yeah.
whatever. But if in advance, if you really love your stories, or maybe a novel, you can condense it into a short story or something and send it to a literary journal. That's a great way to first be seen.
So getting a part of your story that can be turned into a standalone short story was part of what built my publishing credits. It is a great way. The other way is that reciprocity I keep talking about. If you beta read for somebody else who's published by a small press, they might be willing to read your first 3 chapters, and if they like it, read the rest of it, and then recommend you to their agent or publisher. If you have endorsements, you're not going to the slush pile reader. You're going to the agent or the acquisition editor. And you can't ask for something for nothing. You've got to be willing to give to get. So yeah, that's the other thing. Read for other people, they'll read for you. And that's a useful way to actually get feedback. What if you've got a really, oh my gosh, great book, and nobody was telling you towards the end you brought back a character you killed in the middle of the book? Be nice if somebody told you. Okay, one last question. And then, Margie, are you going to come up and say where we're going to lunch and all that?
Yes.
Okay, one last question, and then I'll be in the back. Kathy!
What's the name of the book about the water, changing people into vampires that you were talking about?
Oh, I just made that up. I do that. I do that all the time. But the Netflix series about the moon, that is the Sea of Silence, and it is about making horrible decisions when bad choices have to be made. It's perfect for that Jim Butcher quote. The villain might think that they are making the only choice necessary to save the world. All right, thank you very much.